All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Julie Sullivan. I do the New Agrarian Program mentor training and support. And so I also offer these mentor training calls specifically for the new mentors in our program, but we offer these calls to the general public as well. So there are a handful of people on the call this morning who are coming to us from other programs or ranches. And then there are people here who are with the New Agrarian Program. So I will do my best to make my comments pertinent to both sets of people. But if there's anything that I don't cover that is pertinent to this topic, which is about evaluating applications, please reach out to me by email, and I'm happy to set up a private time to answer more questions or discuss your issues if we don't get to it this morning. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start. So the New Agrarian Program runs on somewhere between 15 to 20 different mentor operations in several different states in the Intermountain West. But we are a coherent program. So one of the things I want to say right from the start is that the way we have designed our application process is that we have a general application which anyone applying to the program, regardless of which mentor site they're applying to, they fill out that specific application and all of the questions in it. There's about 8. They are the same questions, regardless of whether they're applying to a cattle ranch in Montana, one in Colorado, a diversified operation somewhere in New Mexico. So we have a general application, but then there's a specific question in the application where the applicants are asked to identify the specific operations they're interested in and why that particular operation is a good fit for them. And the reason I wanted to mention that is that I know some of the people on this call are running programs that have multiple mentors or host farms. And so when you're trying to figure out a way to both accommodate the sort of individuality of operations and mentors, which can be vastly different, even within the same industry, but you're also trying to run a coherent program, trying to figure out what are the aspects of your program that need to be held in common across all of your operations, and what are the pieces of your program which can be very much individualized as needed by the host farm or mentor. So that's the way we do it. We ask apprentices to select up to 5 mentor operations out of all of the ones we have, and to specifically then identify in their application why they're interested in that. And that question in particular is one that we really encourage our mentors to dial into, because if the comment about why they want to work with you is really generalized, it may be that they didn't even read your site description. That's a little bit of insight into, is this a person who actually reads instructions? Is this somebody who is actually motivated enough that they've done a little research to figure out what kind of an operation you are? So that's something, depending on the application you use in your program, think about how you want to balance those factors and how you're going to give applicants the opportunity to take a deep dive into the specifics of why they're applying and what they're looking for. One of the reasons for that is that we really consider the process of finding an apprentice and mentor to be almost like matchmaking. It's not just, does this person have the skills I'm looking for, but what really is the professional and personal experience that they're seeking, and who's the kind of person who's going to thrive on your operation. And that requires sometimes reading between the lines a little bit in the application. And that's a lot of what we'll talk about during this call this morning. The other thing to think about before you actually start reading your applications, and you might have already done this as part of figuring out what your job description or site description looked like before you started advertising, is anyone on your team who's going to be in a supervisory role with the apprentice or the intern, it's really valuable to get their input. And we'll talk a little more about that in a moment. But one of the things that I've seen happen sometimes is whoever the owner or the general manager of a farm or ranch is, they decide they want to take in an intern or an apprentice or offer a mentoring option. but they're not going to be the hands-on mentor every day. And somebody else on your staff is actually going to be spending 50, 60% of their time training someone. It's really important that they have buy-in and that you found out what are the things that are going to help them work well with someone. So those are all sort of preliminary to even reading the application, is making sure that your team is all on the same page a little bit about what kind of person you're looking for, what level of expertise they need. Are you willing to take a complete novice? Some of our mentors prefer novices because you don't have to untrain them from habits you don't want them to have, particularly around livestock handling. That's a place where sometimes someone with experience can actually be a little more trouble because they have a way that they learned and it can be hard for them to do it your way. So those are some of the things to do before you even start reading applications. And there's a few reasons for that. One reason is that ensures that you're creating a fair and equitable process. If you start reading applications before you've decided what your criteria is, who you're looking for, we've had this happen at our ranch where we would read an application and we'd kind of feel really excited about someone. And it kind of blinded us to reading everyone else's application with an open heart and open mind. And that's not fair to the applicant. So again, try to set up whatever your criteria is, what you're really looking for, what you really need this year before you start reading applications and end up having an unintended bias towards someone. So I'm going to go ahead and share some slides. Well, now it's telling me I can't. Hang on. There we go. All right, back to screen sharing. This is, like I said, you never know. Every single time it can be different. It's telling me I can't share my screen. Let me see. I don't know why it's telling me. Oh, there we go. Maybe it's because there's a snowstorm nearby. Okay, can everybody see that? All right. These are the Southwest apprentices this year in our program at a livestock handling clinic here at our ranch. So creating your criteria. These are some of the things we've learned over 15 years of running this program, and also some of the things our mentors have learned by doing their own hiring, either for employees or interns. But I'm really speaking specifically about hiring somebody who's being hired in a learner capacity, which is different than hiring somebody who already knows everything that you want them to be able to do. So all of these comments will be really tailored to looking for someone who's eager to learn, but may not know everything that you want them to learn. So it's a match. I already talked about that. So when you're reading an application, it's really important to look at not only is this a person who's a good fit for you, but are you a good fit for them? If there's somebody who really wants to spend a lot of time horseback and your ranch doesn't use horses very often, they probably aren't going to be happy at your site. No matter how much else you offer, if that's really key to what they're looking for, you may decide to take a pass on them. Similarly, if there's someone who's really interested in like food systems and connecting with the general public and providing food to their local community, and you don't have any kind of direct marketing part of your business, that may not be a match, no matter how excited you are about who that person is. So make sure that you're clear not only on what you need, but on what you don't offer, so that you don't pick somebody who's going to be disappointed. We've already talked about this. What do you really need? Needing and wanting aren't the same thing. We all know that, but we can get confused sometimes when we're in a hiring process. So do you have minimum standards? Is there something that you absolutely are not willing to teach somebody, that they have to come with experience? For a lot of our mentors, that may be horsemanship skills, that, you know, the horses can be dangerous. You don't want to put somebody on a horse who doesn't know what they're doing. So if you're a horse-based operation, you may feel that someone with a significant amount of horse experience is absolutely required, and you will not consider someone who doesn't have that. We have mentors who don't have the patience to teach people how to drive manual transmission. And I'll tell you, most of these young adults do not know how to drive manual transmission. This is often something they have to learn. We've hired people who didn't know. We made sure that they had some time to learn, and they became absolutely stellar employees. So it's not a reason not to hire them. But again, what's your patience level? What are you willing to teach? What do you need them to arrive on the ground ready to do the day they arrive? And then what do you want? And this is a place sometimes to tease things out. In general, I think those of us with livestock operations would really like to have somebody who has livestock experience. But is it absolutely essential? Is that something that you feel you are really willing to teach from the ground up? Or is that something that you really aren't? Again, I'll tell you that a lot of the applicants in our program have had experience in vegetable farms often, or maybe with poultry, but they usually haven't worked with cattle, and they often haven't worked with small ruminants. It's really difficult to find an entry position into livestock operations. And so they're often trying to make this opportunity their entry point. So just because someone doesn't have large livestock experience, don't discount them immediately if there's something else in their application that you find appealing. I already talked about this. Make sure that any relevant team members are involved in creating your criteria. And in a minute, I'll actually show you the scoring sheets with the criteria that George and I have been using for about 20 years on our ranch, just to give you an example of how to set that up. Specific needs or events this season. This is something that has come up for our mentors a couple of times. We had a mentor a few years ago who knew that they really wanted to be building up their direct marketing business. And so that year, when they were reading applications, they were looking for somebody who was extroverted, who was excited about customer service, who thought doing the farmer's market would be fun. Because they really needed somebody who not only wanted to be a ranch hand, but really was willing to take on that extra piece of customer service and direct marketing. The next year, they had actually built their direct market to the size that they wanted. They had found a great apprentice who was a wonderful fit for them. And that's not what they needed anymore. What they did need was someone who might have had some experience with heavy equipment, carpentry skills, welding. They had a bunch of infrastructure projects they were going to work on that year. And they were really hoping to get an apprentice who was going to be able to come in, not as a complete novice with that set of skills. And again, they were able to find someone who didn't have a bunch of livestock or ranching experience, but had been working in construction and had some transferable skills. So that's something also to think about. Is there something in particular, some kind of project? Are you wanting to start more monitoring on your operation? Or are you trying to move into some different kind of a crop, and having somebody who's really excited about that would be beneficial for you? This next one, I like to sort of really make a point of talking about. Overtly relevant experience is not the best indicator of a good fit for you. And we've learned this time and time again on our ranch and in this program. Really, what you're looking for is someone you're going to be excited to work with every day in our program for 8 months. That's a long haul. So you're going to want to find somebody who has a personality that feels like it's a good fit for you, who is excited to live in the region that they're going to be in, someone who you feel is an enthusiastic learner. If you're someone who's really quiet and doesn't like to talk a lot in the workplace, you may not want to have a really chatty person as your apprentice. On the other side, if you're someone who likes to tell jokes and tell stories when you're driving in the truck between one place and another, having somebody who is like that kind of a personality may be a good fit. So when you're reading your application, think about what are the personality traits that are going to really help a person thrive at your operation and with you and the other people on your staff who are mentoring or teaching. One of the things to look for as well is anybody who has been able to make a long-standing commitment to something. This is a place where they have experience. It's not necessarily in agriculture, but for example, we had an apprentice a number of years ago who throughout high school and college, every summer had a job at a local veterinary office. Granted, it wasn't large livestock, it was cats and dogs. But the fact that she had been able to hold a summer position throughout high school and college years indicated a couple of things. She obviously was very responsible and reliable. Otherwise, they wouldn't have hired her back year after year after year. She made a long-standing commitment to an operation, and she did have some skills that were transferable. She wasn't going to freak out around blood and poop and stitches and all of those kinds of things. So it was a transferable experience, even though it wasn't directly related to agriculture. So those are some of the things to think about when you're creating your criteria. And lastly, this is something I really want to punch up for our mentors this year, which is that we all have blind spots about ourselves. We all probably think we're easier to work with than we actually are. We probably all have places where we get cranky, where we are impatient, where we can be kind of unpleasant to be around. My experience as a rancher is that those are all true about me on any given day. They're certainly true about George, my husband, on any given day. So it's really important for us to think about, what am I like to work with, so that I can make sure that I try to communicate that in the interview process. So I actually have a little activity that I'll send out with the notes from this call, which is called What It's Like Working with Me. And it gives you the opportunity to kind of think about, what are the things that help me have a good work day? What are the ways in which, what are the things about someone that I'm working with that I find really annoying? And what are the things about me that are probably annoying for other people? And if you're willing to do a little bit of self-reflection like that, I guarantee you, you will pick a better person for yourself. You will pick somebody who will do a good job with you and for you. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, some sort of written scoring system. It's really good to figure out how you're going to rank your applicants. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the systems that the new agrarian program has in a second. But I wanted to pause for a minute and see if anybody has any input or any questions about sort of that overarching, how do you get ready to read applications so that you can start sorting them as you go? One? I can't always see if you put your hand up, but I don't see anybody's hand up. All right, I'm going to go ahead. So scoring systems. One of the reasons that in the new agrarian program, we strongly recommend / require mentors to have some sort of a written note-taking system. There's two reasons. One is, if you're lucky enough to get a lot of applications, you're not going to remember everything that you read. And so having some way that you're writing down notes will help you go back then after you've read all your applications and your application period has closed, and really review everything and figure out, who do you definitely want to interview, who are you uncertain about interviewing, and who is your maybe pile, and maybe you want to do a second read of that application. So the other reason, other than your memory and having good notes to use when you're making your decisions, is actually legal. It's really important, and in our program, this is very important to us, that we make sure that we have a fair and equitable interviewing process. And one of the ways that you can demonstrate that you gave everybody's application a read and you gave everybody's application a fair shot is if you have written notes. So we, to date, have never had anybody come back and make a complaint that they were unfairly passed over for a position, but it's always possible. So for your own protection, we really recommend that you have some sort of written note-taking system. So if somebody did come back and claim that you had unfairly not considered them, or you had a prejudice against them for some reason, you can demonstrate that you actually gave them a fair shot. So this application rubric basically follows the new agrarian apprentice application. So this is a really simple note-taking system. A lot of our mentors like this. So something like this might work for you if either if you're in the program or you're running your own operation. So our application for apprentices, there's a section where we ask them sort of yes, no, basic skills. Do you know how to drive manual transmission? Have you backed a trailer? Can you lift 50 pounds? Blah, 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 blah. So that basic skills is just sort of a, do they have these basic skills I'm looking for or not? And a place to make notes. Resume, we ask them to submit a current resume. So there's a place to indicate whether or not you feel that they have experience or interests or education, which you're excited to consider. Vision, we have a couple of questions in our application which ask apprentices sort of their vision long-term around land management, ecological stewardship of working landscapes, food systems. For a lot of mentors in our program, that why a person is interested in going into agriculture and food systems is actually a really important indicator of their capacity to stick with it for 8 months. So those vision questions can be really valuable, and there's a place to make notes about that. Experience, that goes without saying this. Do they have relevant experience or not? Motivation, that gets back to that. What's their why? Why do they want to do this? Are they just kind of floating? They don't know what else to do this year, so they applied to your program? Or do they really have a deep-seated interest in going into agriculture or food production? And then we have one question at the end of our application, which is a sort of choose your own adventure question. It's lighthearted. It doesn't have anything to do with agriculture. It's questions like, tell us about a moment of beauty and joy you had this year, or tell us what kind of animal you would like to be and why. So it's a playful question, and they get to pick which one they want to answer. The reason we include that is that tells you a little bit about the person's personality. It gets back to that. Is this somebody I'm interested in? Is this somebody I'm curious about? Mentoring is different than being an employer. Mentoring means you're going to be making a personal investment into who this human is, not just what kind of a worker they are. So that creativity question, the vision question, those give you some insight into what kind of person this is, and is this someone you're excited to mentor? And then you know, some people like to use a numerical score, 1 being this person does not have a lot of strength in this area, 5 being high, and then an indication whether or not you're interested in interviewing them or not. I'll show you the other one. This is ours for our ranch, and as you can see, it is infinitely more detailed. And I will send these both out with the notes, so don't worry about straining your eyes to try to see closely. But these are all of the things George and I are trying to learn about an applicant. Some of these we can learn from their application. Some of these are probably things that are not in the application. And so if we decide to interview the person, this helps us know what kinds of questions we want to ask. So for us, this sort of provides double duty. It gives us a way to rank applications, but it also helps prepare us for interviewing if we decide we're going to do that. So there's a section on communication. You know, what kind of experience do they have with conflict? You know, what are they like as a team member? Do they seem to be someone who's had an opportunity to use their own judgment to solve problems? It gets down to 30 below here, so we always ask them about their experience with really cold weather and isolation. We ask some very nuts and bolts questions about tractors, manual transmission, carpentry, fencing, both electric and permanent. You know, I mean, barbed wire, water lines, experience with animals, range ecology, We do direct marketing, so we do ask them some questions about their interest or their experience with bookkeeping. Are they interested in that aspect of ranching? So this is just more detail. So again, all of this just to show you that you figure out what are the important pieces of information that you absolutely hope to learn when you're reading an application. And then if you do choose to interview someone, these are the things that you're trying to learn in order to know whether you want to say yes or no to this person. So with that, I'm going to move on. Okay, so the process we have with our mentors at the New Agrarian Program is really tried and true, and we do request that they actually follow this process. So I'm going to kind of review this, and hopefully this is helpful for those of you that are not in our program. Our applications opened on November 1st and they close on December 15th. We've found that that 6-week window is a pretty good window. Usually applications come in really slowly initially, and then there's kind of a little flurry sort of right after Thanksgiving. And then there's usually a bunch of them that come in last minute. Just because something comes in last minute, don't assume it's because someone was procrastinating. We've found that people who really, really want this position often write their application 3 or 4 times. And they edit it and they have somebody else read it, and like so just because it comes in a little bit close to the deadline doesn't mean that that's a black mark against that person. So depending on who you are and how your time management works on your operation, you can either read applications as they come in and do your sort of scoring and note taking. Some of our mentors wait until that December 15th deadline, and then they just set aside a day or two and they're going to read them all at once. So whatever process works best for you is the one to figure out. Something else to consider is that if you do have other people on your team who are going to be in a supervisory or training capacity with the person you're hiring, how do you want them to be involved in reading applications? Do you feel like you just want to make the decision? I don't think that's necessarily the best choice. So some options are you read all of the applications and the people you're most excited about, you pass those on to the other people who will be supervisors or trainers for the young person who's coming to your operation. Some people will just make some really quick summary notes. Some people will just have a sit-down meeting. In our case, we actually have sort of assistant managers who are past apprentices in the program, and we include them in the process right from the beginning. So they'll read the applications as they come in and do their own scoring, and then we'll meet as a team in order to make a decision, because they actually do a significant amount of the daily work with the apprentice. It's really important that they're picking somebody that's going to be a good fit for them, not just for George and I. So read them as you go or wait until the deadline. Written scoring system, some way to take notes. One of the ways that I like to take notes is that I actually print out the application. And I know it's a waste of paper, but I'm a paper person. I'm from the generation that held pieces of paper in order to do things. And I like to write my notes right on the application. And the reason I like to do that, so actually what I do now is I read the application online initially. And if it's someone I'm interested in, I will print it out. And then I'll write notes on it, because if I'm going to interview that person, I want to have their actual words right in front of me while I'm interviewing them, so I can refer to something that they say in their application when I ask them a question. I can say, I see that you say that you did night calving duties a year ago at a ranch. Could you tell me a little bit more about any problems or issues that arose that you had to deal with? So I have it right in front of me. It helps me be a better interviewer. So that's my trick, but that's not necessary. For a lot of people, they like to do a really quick, fast sort. So as you read your applications, you just sort of decide, this is somebody I'm interested in. This is someone who's a definite no. And here's my maybe pile. And I really encourage you to have a maybe pile. A lot of times the people that are a definite yes for you are a definite yes for a lot of other people. Not only within the New Agrarian Program, if you're part of that, but a lot of times they've applied to jobs all over the place. So if you only pick 2 people that you're really excited about, they might both get other jobs. So have that maybe pile, the people who aren't your absolute top pick, but you would consider them. There's something about their application that makes you curious, and when you consider at least interviewing them, you might not hire them, but you might interview them. On our ranch, we use like a 0 to 5 scale. So on that score sheet I showed you, that's our score sheet, the one with all the detail. We'll do a 0 to 5 as we're reading the application. This person is talking about times when, they've had a lot of experience working in teams. And so I'm going to give them a 3 or a 3.5 or a 4 for being people. We work closely as a team on our ranch. People have some individual work time and some time when we're all working together. So someone who's comfortable working in a team and doesn't want to always work solo is really important to us. So I'll score them on that. Couple of last things here. Really look for more than experience. Like I said before, we hired a young woman who didn't really have a lot of agricultural experience, but she'd worked in that vet office for so many years. The other thing about her that really impressed us was at a very young age, she started doing classical Indian dance, and she did that all the way through high school. So here was someone who did really well in high school, went to a good college, was holding down a job, and had this extracurricular activity that she did for a significant number of years. That demonstrates somebody who really knows what it means to make a commitment. And you go even when you don't feel like it. I mean, that's a big part of agriculture, is like, it may be a nasty day out there and you still get up and go out there. So those are the kinds of things, that's that reading between the lines thing I was talking about. One of the things that's really important to us on our ranch is somebody who's self-aware. So as we're reading their application, we're looking for places where they acknowledge that something didn't turn out really well and it was their own fault, or a way in which they learned something by having a difficult experience. For us on our ranch, it's really hard to teach someone self-awareness. I can teach them how to back up a trailer. So think about some of those things that you're looking for and see if you can glean anything from the application about that. Often for us in our interview, this is the place where we ask a lot of questions, are things around communication, conflict, teamwork, as well as some nuts and bolts questions. And then lastly, one last thing I'll do is, if you are in a situation where there's more than one person who's going to be the mentor or the supervisor, I wanted to share with you the process we do at our ranch. Sometimes there are 3 of us, sometimes there are 4 of us who are already working here. And like I said, we work as a close team. So each of us will read the applications independent of one another. We won't talk to each other. We just sit down with our scoring sheet and we go through it. And then we'll have a meeting where we sit down and we each go around and we say, this is the person I'm excited about and why. These are the people I think aren't a good fit. And we just kind of get everybody's input. And then we determine sort of as a team, who are the people we're really interested in interviewing. So we like to be really inclusive at our ranch. That's certainly not required. Everybody's operation runs differently. But again, if you do have someone who's going to be spending, 40 to 50% of the apprentice's time is going to be spent with someone other than you, I really encourage that you include them in this process somehow. And then lastly, references. In our application, we ask apprentices to note 2 professional references and 1 personal. The reason for the personal reference is that sometimes people who are, 18, 19, 20, they don't have a whole lot of work experience. They may have a high school teacher or a coach from a sport that can write them a letter of who can be a reference, but they may not have 3 professional references. So we have the personal reference just as an opportunity for them to have someone else that they can list. We do recommend that people call references. I have been surprised at how often ranchers I know hire somebody without calling a reference and then regret it. So, and George and I, one year, we were absolutely dead set on hiring somebody. We'd gone through a virtual interview. The person had actually come to the ranch and spent a work day with us. Felt like this was the right person for us. We called references, and they happened to be other ranchers we knew, and we knew that their input would be valuable. And we asked a couple of really good questions, and we found out that this is probably not somebody we wanted to hire. So it's a good thing we called before we actually offered this person the job. So I do recommend that you call references. You can call them right early in the process. I tend to call them after I do the first interview. So I'm only calling a handful of people rather than references for, 15 or 20 people. One of the documents I will send out with this are some questions that we've come up with that we recommend mentors ask references. If somebody is listed as a reference, more than likely they're going to give you a really glowing report of the human. But one of the things I've found is that if I let the reference know that this is a training position, this is an educational position, it's not just a job. And so I really want to know how to support this person as they're learning. And so I'm going to ask some questions where I ask for some really honest input, like, if you were going to tell this person one area where you really think they need to be growing, what would it be? Do they need to be taking more responsibility? Do they have time management issues? Not because I'm not going to hire them, but because I know then that as a mentor, this is a place where I'm going to need to spend some time and energy. So we'll talk more about references in the December call when we actually talk about interviewing. So this is just, again, this is a document that I'll send out with the notes. But one of the other things that I was actually just doing an exit interview with one of our mentors from this year yesterday. And they said that they realized in retrospect that during the interview, they had learned a lot about the person's sort of hard skills, their technical skills, what they kind of physically knew how to do. But they didn't ask questions to help them figure out, is this a person who's going to thrive working for me in my operation? So we've actually designed some questions that we encourage people to incorporate into their interview process. And we'll talk more about these in December, but I'll send them out now because as you're reading applications, it may be that you want to take a note. I'm really curious to interview this person, and I want to ask them a couple of kind of deeper dive questions to try to learn a little bit more thoroughly who they are. So, describe an activity where you regularly engaged and required physical strength. This is a place where a lot of people have a lot of recreational experience, but they haven't necessarily bucked bales every day for 3 months. It's a different kind of physical activity. So knowing something about that, have they worked, not just recreated in sub-zero weather or in high heat? I really like this question. If I asked a past coworker or your boss for your 2 top strengths and the 2 areas where you most need to grow, what would they say? So I'm asking them to not tell me what they think. I'm asking them to be a little bit more reflective and take a moment and think about, what kind of a person am I? Like, what am I like to work with? And I find that I usually get a pretty honest answer if I ask the question this way. What do you hope to be doing in 3 years? George really likes the question, if I opened your refrigerator, what would I find? The creativity question, if you were an animal, what would you be and why? So we have a kind of a full page of these kinds of questions that we'll send out. And like I said, these are more in the interview moment, but I'll send them out now just so you have them in case they help kind of give you some ideas about things you want to still learn about somebody before you make a job offer. Let me see. I'm almost done with talking nonstop at you, and then I will pause. So for the new agrarian mentors, I just wanted to briefly remind you of the timeline. More than likely, the NAP coordinator or manager that you've been working with has already communicated this information to you. But for everybody on the call, this is the timeline we have and the process we have. Most of our apprentices are going to arrive on site in March. That's why we actually open up applications as early as we do, is that we want to let mentors have significant time to make decisions, do interviews, ideally be able to make their job offers by early February, so that that young person has at least a month in order to be able to sort of give notice wherever they're working, do whatever they need to do on a personal level with family and friends in order to be able to relocate. Because our apprenticeships are residential, the apprentices are usually relocating from someplace, and they need time to be able to do that. So applications close December 15th. We do request that mentors not contact any applicant prior to that closing date. As of December 15th, you can indeed start to email the people you're interested in interviewing. And we do have some template emails that we can send to you for how to, tell somebody you are interested in interviewing them, tell somebody that, thank you for applying, but, you won't be moving forward into an interview. And then an email template that says we're still in process, a kind of one for your maybe pile. So as of December 15th or up as you're going through your applications, try to pick 4 or 6 people that you're interested in doing an initial interview with. Phone or video interviews are what we ask our mentors to do. And those interviews some mentors will start interviewing in the second half of December. A lot of people will wait until the beginning of January. But we do recommend that you're interviewing people by early January because other mentors are as well. And again, remember, these apprentices apply to multiple sites. So just kind of figuring out your timeline and making sure that you're kind of keeping on track is going to help you make sure that you get the person you want. We'll talk more about setting up the interview schedule in early December on that call. But for mentors in our program, the NAP coordinator or I will be on that interview with you. And the reason for that is that there are some elements of our program which we offer, like supplemental education calls and orientation and the conference. As new mentors, you may not feel completely conversant in describing those aspects of the program to the apprentice. So we're on the call in order to help with that. But the other reason, and I think the more important reason, is that I have found over the years that having that NAP coordinator who is not working on my ranch, having their insight and observations during that interview helps me pick a better person. Like they'll often see something that I don't notice. If I'm interviewing somebody who I'm really excited about, I may not see a red flag, but that NAP staff person will see it. And then when we talk after the interview, they'll say, I noticed when you were talking about cold weather, they said they were okay, but I could kind of tell from their body language and their face that I'm not so sure they've ever really experienced that. So this might be a place where we need to ask a follow-up question. So that NAP person is just there sort of as additional support. We used to ask that applicants do a site visit. Now that we have mentor sites all over the Intermountain West, and we don't have a way to financially support applicants doing site visits, we don't require that. Some mentors feel really strongly that they'd like to meet the person in person. And so this is something you can talk to your NAP coordinator or me about if you feel like you'd like to do site visits, but some of your applicants are going to be from 1,000 miles away, and more than likely they won't be able to do that. So I think that's it. So I know that was a lot of information kind of thrown at you. The recording and the notes from this call will go out and all of those supporting documents. So you'll have a chance to kind of look at those things more thoroughly in your own time. But does anybody have any questions or insights or thoughts about sort of that overall process of reviewing applications, looking for a good fit?
Julie,
Yeah.
is, I don't know, this is not all that relevant, but is it okay to ask if English is their primary language or not? Just, I mean, we got an applicant the other day that was well written and stuff, but like tenses in his writing, he didn't get at all. And it just, you know, I guess I'm a snob from when our daughter was in elementary school and her teacher sent comments out using there and there incorrectly. So just,
you know, I don't think that is a protected class. You know, things like race, age, gender, sexual orientation, those are federally protected classes. We can't really ask questions about that of people, and we can't use those as criteria for whether or not we hire somebody. I don't know that English as a first language, I don't think it's a federally protected thing. So what I'd say is you need to determine how relevant that is to the position.
it's not really relevant as long as we can communicate well, but it would help me understand them better.
Yeah. And so that's something that I think, you know, I will double check with legal counsel on whether you could ask that as a question. Because some things we just aren't allowed to ask, even though that's important information that we feel that we would like to know. So my guess is a couple of things. Number one, there are a lot of native English speakers who absolutely don't understand the difference between certain words like that. I think that as we've moved from a written culture into a visual culture, a lot of that sort of grammar. I used to teach college level writing, so yeah, I get it. I've noticed for the last 15 years a steady decline in that, even in English speaking students who are in graduate school. So I would say that you don't borrow the jack. Don't assume that that's the reason for it. And if there are other reasons why this is someone you're interested in, I would say go ahead and consider doing the interview for them. The other thing is that some people just don't write well.
Yeah, no, well, it may be a benefit.
Yeah. So anyway, and I see that Ellie, you've got your hand up too.
Yeah, good morning. I was just wondering if you know if there's any legal requirements for holding on to resumes that you receive. I'd heard this at some previous positions, but I've never looked it up.
You know, I don't know. You know, I know that it used to be common for people back when people actually like physically sent a resume and a letter of introduction, for businesses to hold on to resumes specifically because this might be somebody you want to contact in the future. I don't know. That's a really good question. So one place that might have an answer to that off the top of my head is Farm Commons. I don't know if you're familiar with Farm Commons. They do great legal work for people in agriculture. So they may have something even, you know, in the free part of their website that identifies that. I can certainly ask. But my guess is that you could probably just Google it and find out. And it might be that state by state, there's some differences with that. I've never heard that it is not okay to hold on to them. So it's interesting that may actually have that may have evolved.
Oh no, I think that my question is more like, is it okay to get rid of them?
Oh, I think it's perfectly okay to get rid of them. What I would suggest you do is that you hold on to your interview notes. And you know, I bet that Farm Commons would have guidance about how long should you hold on to documentation from applications and interviews, so that if somebody did come back with a complaint, you can demonstrate that you looked at their information.
Thanks.
Yeah, wolf cattle. What's your
Hi.
question?
Yeah, maybe you're gonna cover this in the next video, but I'm curious about questions you can ask references. What are we legally allowed to ask and not, and how do you get the best information out of a few questions?
Well, I think it's probably my understanding, and I will double check this before the December call, is my understanding is it's probably the exact same questions you can't ask the applicant. So you can't ask them how old they are. You can't ask them health conditions. You can't, like, specifically, you can't ask, sexual orientation or gender, or are they married? Do they have children? Like, all of those are questions we are not allowed to ask. I think that you can ask questions that help you understand whether the person is a good fit or not. So you could say something like, were there issues that arose that made it difficult for this person to be a reliable worker? Like, that's an open-ended question. So then if the person, they could then say, oh, they threw their back out every other month.
Okay.
But so you can't ask if they have a back issue, but you can ask a question that is related to a requirement, a physical requirement, or a mental or intellectual requirement of the job. So, like, you could say, were they someone who was timely? And then they can say, this person had insomnia and was late every single day. Like, so does that help clarify, like, how you can ask the question?
Yeah, that makes sense, because I know from the references legal standpoint too, there's certain things they can't say. So how do we try to pull out the information without compromising their stance too? That I think is, so that helps.
Yeah, the basic legal counsel is you disclose the specifics that you need in, like in the interview. You can, with an applicant, you can say, this job absolutely requires that you be able to do X. And so if for any reason, that's something you aren't confident you can do, this isn't going to be the right position for you. So
Okay.
that's the basic, and that goes with things too, like, sometimes you'll have applicants apply who may not believe in evolution for religious purposes. You can't ask them that, but you can say, we're a ranch that believes, as part of our ecological understanding of working with the planet, we believe, in evolution. And so when we're talking about how we work with our systems and our land, that may come up. So if that's an uncomfortable educational environment for you, we may not be a good fit. So that's the way you handle delicate information, is you can disclose things that are true for you. And then the person gets to determine whether or not that is an environment that is appropriate for them. So that's the general legal counsel about all of those kind of tricky things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And we can dive more into that in the December call. And I'm certainly happy to, if people have specific informations, because I do think that this is a difficult situation. We're all hiring people for physically demanding work. And it's also psychologically and emotionally demanding work. Having animals dying on your lap in a blizzard is hard. And so there are characteristics and qualities we know will help someone thrive, but we can't necessarily ask a direct question about that. So it is a really tricky place.
Okay, thank you. That's
Yeah.
helpful.
I know we have a few more minutes. Any other questions or comments or things people have found useful for them when they're reading applications? Is your hand still up, Hannah, or is that just didn't get a chance to take it down yet? Okay. All right, well, I will let you go. I will send out the notes and the recording and the support documents that I was talking about either later today or tomorrow. And then, like I said, if you have any questions at all, if there's any way I can be supportive, please reach out. My email directly is just julie@kiviracoalition.org. But you could also send it to New Agrarian. And it will get to me as well. And I'm happy to help however I can. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, Julie.
Bye.